Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. I heard a story the other day about a group of seminary students who were challenged to study the parable of the Good Samaritan. And they were supposed to then study that and then give that message to a group of students on campus. But what they didn't know is they were kind of being punked. And so this professor that gave them that challenge placed somebody between where their classroom was and where the chapel that they were supposed to give this message to a group of people was. And he said, hey, you're running late, you've got to go. We've got to go now. And he did this to each student over the course of time. And as they went, they had just studied what it says, that you're supposed to stop and care for others. I mean, that's the whole message of the Good Samaritan, is to not pass somebody in need by thinking your own needs are more important. And they're ready to give this message, this sermon to a whole group of people about that. And as they walk, they hustle and they hurry. There's somebody on campus pretending to be hurt, pretending to be in need. And every single one of the seminary students, the people who are teaching us about how we should live life, walk past this person and they fail the test. And I would argue that a number of us live our faiths this way. I can admit that I have and I do on a pretty regular basis. I have my own agenda and I want to do my own thing, and oftentimes I get so caught up in that I miss out on opportunities to serve, not only serve, but to be Jesus in the lives of others. This past year, I picked up one of my favorite books of all time called Blue Like Jazz, and I read it for the second time. And in it, there were so many different life lessons about just real life practical faith that I wanted to do a series based on Blue Like Jazz. And in that book, the Blue Like Jazz piece is admitting that our faith should be more like listening to jazz and navigating jazz. And so this series is called Dancing to Jazz. Because our faith isn't meant to be lived alone, and it's also meant to be more of an art, more of a weaving of layers. I mean, jazz is kind of something that moves within you. Our faith is supposed to do that as well. Instead of being set group of rules that we follow, our faith is supposed to kind of be something that we live within and that pours out of us. There's some kind of an art to living this out. And Donald Miller says in his book, he says that I admit that I often talk about love and forgiveness and social justice and all of these sorts of things, and yet I haven't controlled my own heart. And so when it comes to my faith, I'm kind of internal, but I talk about all these other things that I'm not going to do anything about. He says, to be honest, the overwhelming majority of the time I spend thinking about myself, pleasing myself, reassuring myself, and when I'm done, there's nothing left to spare for this world, for the needy. There's 6 billion people living in this world, and I can only muster thoughts for one, me. He goes on to say, I wonder how beautiful it might be to think of others as more important than myself. I wondered to myself at how peaceful it might be to not just be pestered by the childish voice that wants to pleasure just myself and attention for just myself. I wondered what it would be like not to live in a house of mirrors, everywhere I go being reminded of myself. This powerful stuff. And he's challenging himself. He's wrestling with this in himself. And then he also says, come on, we can admit that we all are kind of like this, right? The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 5:15, it says that he died for everyone. Jesus died for everyone so that those who receive his new life will no longer live for themselves. This is what we're asked to do. Jesus said, look, I put my life on the line for you, not just for you, but for everyone, so that we don't live for ourselves. He says, instead, they will live for Jesus who died and was raised for them. I know, and Donald Miller admits, he even says, when I walk into a Christian bookstore, honestly, it seems like every book is written for me and myself to get better at being me and myself. And that just isn't what God is asking for us. The pervasive narrative of the Bible is that our lives are not our own. And what if more of us who claim to be Christ followers, people who want to show the world more of who Jesus is, would live in a way that we wouldn't pass by the needy. We wouldn't be so self-focused on being the best prayer and have like the best church attendance, but that we'd actually live that out. That's my challenge this week for myself, and I would hope that it extends to you. In this world, as we try to figure out how we integrate God into our normal lives so that faith and life are not two separate things, they are woven together. And that we get to do this dance, live this art, this jazz. I would encourage us as we live out our faith this week that we examine. When we look in the mirror, we see other people and we see our call, our challenge to serve those around us, that we would see the needs of others and that we would give of ourselves, of our time, and of our efforts so that people could know a relationally loving God.